A lot of rumors that the FDA is going to approve MDMA.
Yeah.
And I know this is like speculating, but
Yeah.
we love to speculate in the investor world, don't we?
Of
But
course.
in the event that we do see FDA approving, let's say Q1 of next year, what does that present for like companies like yourselves that are deep in this space? Thanks for checking into our latest TDR Psychedelic Exclusive, and a big guest we have here this morning because this stock has been ripping since the beginning of the calendar year. We welcome him, Nick Kadysh, CEO of Pharmala, which trades under the ticker symbol MDMA on the CSE. Good to see you, and happy 2023, even though we're here in May. We haven't talked for a while.
Yeah. It's good to see you. And yeah, it has been a happy 2023 for us. A lot of things landing.
Yeah, it's grabbed a lot of people's interest, and I think when you look at this stock, going back as many like 6 months ago, it was trading at 2.5 cents. I don't know where we were last, but it hit as much as 50 cents last week. But what would
We
you
hit a high
say?
of 55 today. So it's
50,
been
55 cents.
Yeah.
So when the market's been struggling, you've been obviously one of the feel-good stories within the industry, but if you had to like present yourself in front of a group of whether it's retail or institutional investors and they say, why the move, what would you say to them?
Yeah, look, a couple of things. I would say number one, we've been very, very good about building partnerships. Like
Yeah.
I'm very much of the opinion that you can't do it alone. So back in November, we signed a partnership with Mindset Pharma. We became their exclusive global reseller for their psilocybin. Right? That allowed us to go into places like Australia when the TGA announced regulatory changes. We could honestly go in there and say, hey, listen, we're the only company in the world right now that has GMP MDMA and GMP psilocybin already made in inventory, ready to ship, day one, let's go. And so, like, those kinds of partnerships are hugely important if you want to have first mover advantage because no company can do it by themselves. And I think part of the reason you're seeing the stock price appreciation, part of it is like regulatory changes are landing, and that is helping us for sure. But part of it is we were positioned for those regulatory changes.
So there's other companies in the space right now that are producing MDMA, but you're saying that you're the exclusive. Can you elaborate a little bit on that, the difference between the two?
So, look, in terms of MDMA, I would say that there's only two entities that I know of for a fact that have made GMP MDMA. That's
Okay.
ourselves and MAPS.
And maps.
For anyone else, I mean, like, there's lots of people who say, like, they will in the future, we're going to, we might, but I've never seen a certificate of analysis for any other manufacturer that's saying, like, here is a batch record
Yeah.
of GMP MDMA that's been made.
And this is global, correct,
This
for
is
you?
globally, yeah, this is global
Okay.
for sure. It's a global
Um,
market.
News earlier this week, you announced that you formed a 50-50 joint venture with Vitura Health Limited out of Australia. And man, oh man, is Australia gaining a lot of attention pertaining to this industry, knowing that research, you get 40 cents back on every dollar that you spend.
43.
Is it 43?
43
Which
cents.
is,
Yeah, a
which is
dollar.
huge.
In a check. In a check. It's not a tax credit or anything. It's a check. Yeah.
Talk about monthly distribution. Like, that's nice, right?
Yeah.
So Vitura Health Limited, they're an ASX Australian listed medical cannabis company. This is what they did, but with the joint venture, it'll focus solely on psychedelics. So
right.
I guess the big question is like maybe talk in depth what this partnership means. Like why this company and where did the interest come on their end, knowing predominantly they focused on cannabis in the past?
Yeah, of course. So look, we when we saw the regulatory change that the TGA
Yeah.
announced on February 3rd, look, my entire team, we're all regulatory people, really. Like the company was basically founded on like regulatory excellence. We call ourselves a regulatory first organization because these are highly regulated compounds. And as soon as we saw the TJ announcement, we figured out right away that this was going to be a sea change. Like, this is the first legitimate market for psychedelics anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Right? Real medical market where patients have real patient access.
Yeah.
Really, really important. And so we immediately went to Australia. Like, by the end of February, beginning of March, we were on the ground in Australia and we had two goals. And I can talk about this because I shared it with all my shareholders in a shareholder letter back at the beginning of March.
Okay.
Goal number one was to onshore manufacturing in Australia. Why? Because number one, we can do that, right? We have IP related to manufacturing. We can move all our manufacturing there. Get rid of all the costs of import-export, which in controlled substances, very, very high. And the second thing that we needed right away was a real legitimate partner to do our distribution. I mean, people forget, but distribution is really, really hard.
Yeah.
If you don't own your distribution channel, you are always at the behest of someone else. And the only way to do distribution basically is either you build it yourself at great
Yep.
cost,
Yep.
or you find somebody who's already expert in it. And we interviewed, I think, 6 different entities. We were at one point we were under a letter of intent negotiation with like 6 different entities. But Vitura was by far and away the best on a number of metrics. Number
Okay.
one, if you look at their leadership team, these guys are like genuinely top class, right? Rodney Cox, who's their CEO, is former Australian of the Year. He's a war hero. Went to Wharton, like serious guy. Guy Headley, who's their chief commercial officer, very, very great businessman. So we spent a lot of time with these guys in Australia, in Toronto. I'm very, very confident that the personalities are a great match. But number two, they've managed to become the top player in medical cannabis in Australia. There is no recreational market in
Okay.
Australia. It's entirely medical. And so they work with doctors every day. They work with controlled molecules, Schedule 8 controlled molecules, which is what
Yep.
psychedelics are going to be down there.
Yep.
So these guys are just by far and away the best partners we could possibly hope to find in Australia to actually execute. And the joint venture, which is called Cortexa, I'm confident is going to be the biggest player in psychedelics in Australia for the foreseeable future.
How'd they find out about you?
So actually, well, we were talking to some of their competitors. We had announced that we had made some sales there, and they reached out to us, and they basically said, "Look, guys, like you would be remiss if you didn't consider us, and
Yep.
here are all the reasons why." And honestly, they convinced us.
So what kind of revenue potential could this present for you? Do you have an idea yet?
Well, another CEO in Australia. I'm not as familiar with the Australian market as obviously as Vitura or some of the other folks, but there was an Australian CEO who recently stated, I think this week, that he believes that the Australian psychedelics market is about $2 billion a year.
Two
So
billion.
it's a significant market, and this is the first market in the world where there's real scalability, real patient access. It is a new sort of world out there.
Well, when you look at even the American market, I learned last week that 14 million people in the U.S. alone suffer from PTSD.
Yeah.
And when you think about what the FDA could potentially do later this year regarding MDMA,
Yeah.
this is why I've been recently having a lot of conversations with various thought leaders in the space, and I'm very bullish on this industry as to where this is going to go, because a lot of feedback I'm hearing is that, like, look, they have to vote within, like, by October to see if they're going to approve this. And obviously Australia, with what they did 2 months ago by legalizing from a medicinal standpoint both MDMA and psilocybin. One thing I wanted to ask, though, and we did do a story after that announcement, is that some Australians are going to have to pay as much as $25,000 out of pocket. What does that look like? Like, do you think insurance coverage will eventually cover people from Australia pertaining to that?
So look, Chad, I think it's really, really important when you talk about cost is that you start breaking down the cost, right?
Okay.
The drug cost is a relatively small part of this.
Okay.
The biggest part of it is, let's look at MDMA assisted psychotherapy for example.
Yeah.
MDMA assisted psychotherapy is there's a preparatory session with a therapist. There's an actual MDMA assisted psychotherapy session, up to 8 hours of therapy in one day, right? And then there's integration therapy afterwards, where you talk about sort of what you experience on the drug. That's like 20, 25 hours
It's a lot of
total
cost.
of therapy.
Yeah.
That's pure labor cost with a highly qualified therapist. The drug is I don't know, 5%, 10%. It's not a big portion of it. Therapy is generally reimbursed as long as, if you're a veteran, therapy is generally reimbursed, right? The therapy part is not the difficult part to get over the line. That's the first thing I tell you. The
Yeah.
second thing I would just say is, if you look broadly at the economic cost, so let's look at, again, MDMA. MDMA is approved in Australia, or not approved, I should say. It's allowed to be prescribed for
Okay.
post-traumatic stress disorder. Most people get PTSD in their core working years. So between 20 and 40 is when the majority of PTSD incidents, the traumatic incidents, happen. And
How
so
about 46?
46, I don't know, man. Listen, that's between you and your therapist, okay?
Yeah, exactly.
But look, those are that is the time in which a person has their most productive sort of years still ahead of them, right? And if you look at somebody with severe PTSD, like, they're out of the workforce, They
Yeah.
are unable to contribute, and obviously huge cost to the healthcare system, huge cost to quality of life
Yeah.
for the patients themselves. If we're talking about $20,000 to get back 20 working years of a person's life, even if you just look at it just dispassionately on an economic basis, that's a deal any day of the week.
Great way of breaking
Um,
it down. It's a
yeah,
great way of
and
breaking
look,
it down.
and from the patient's perspective, you're giving them their lives back.
Yeah.
So yes, I think it's a bargain at twice the price.
So when you talk about distribution, so you produce the MDMA at your facility. It's in BC, correct?
We have actually several facilities that we utilize in Canada. We have an asset-light model, so we use contract manufacturing.
Yep.
The way that the joint venture is structured is for the initial sort of July 1st when the treatments start, we will be utilizing material that we've already made. The joint venture will be purchasing from Pharmala and just shipping it into Australia. But for the
Wow.
future, we are transferring all of our methodologies, all of our manufacturing know-how into facilities in Australia, and we're going to onshore the manufacturing. We will produce for the Australian market domestically, and that's going to
Wow.
keep our costs much, much lower in the long run.
Yeah. So explain to us what kind of pole position advantage you have when it comes to, I guess, the production of like kind of like what you said, but versus say like other companies in the space, especially pertaining to pharmaceutical grade MDMA and
Yeah.
psilocybin.
So look, there is pharmaceutical grade psilocybin out there. We work with Mindset to they manufacture it. We sell it for them. We are very very pleased with that partnership. They're great guys.
Yeah,
They're
I
great
bet.
partners. And like very high quality sort of manufacturers, right? Which in this space you have to focus on quality. It's like the cornerstone of your credibility. When it comes to MDMA, I believe at this juncture we are still the only ones. There are other people who say that they will, or there's even people who say that they have, but then when they are pressed about, when they made it, how they made it, do they
Yeah.
have documentation, it always kind of seems to disappear. I got to be honest, Chad. I welcome competition because competition is what grows the whole market, right? Like, it's not enough just to have Coca-Cola. You need Coke, Pepsi, and Dr. Pepper. That's what grows a healthy marketplace, right?
So what would you say then, based off of what you just commented there? Like, are there concerns with other players getting involved as far as the production to MDMA that could be detrimental for the industry? If so, what are some, I guess, the proper protocols to prevent that from happening that governments are basically asking and wanting to see?
Well, look, they want to see all of your regulatory documentation, right? Like when you
Yep.
manufacture under GMP, that means it has to be a licensed facility that has all the standard operating procedures in place to manufacture something for human use. It's not simple. It's actually quite complicated, which is why I think we were the first ones, other than MAPS, to do it, right? And we took a lot of risk to do that. We invested a lot of time and money to manufacture MDMA before this regulatory change happened, before there was a consumer market, because we believed that it was important to have GMP MDMA, clinical grade MDMA, for researchers, right? Which is who we were selling to before this. So now that there is a consumer marketplace, I do expect that other folks will come online,
Yep.
but I don't know how many other folks will come online in Australia. And being
Mm.
domestic to Australia for that market is, in my mind, a huge advantage from a cost of goods perspective, which is
Mm.
the goal, right? We want to make sure that Cortexa, our joint venture with Vitura, is the most cost effective provider of both MDMA and psilocybin in Australia for
Yep.
that market.
Want to bring up as well, you announced last week news where you signed a purchase order for GMP, Laneo, MDMA, and psilocybin by a company called Incannex, which is a NASDAQ-listed psychedelic research company and a clinic operator based in Australia. So, needless to say, you got to love this Aussie connection. Talk maybe in depth on what this purchase order agreement presents for the company.
Well, look, number one, Incannex is a great company. They are doing both research and they're going to start operating clinics after July 1st with this TGA change that we've been talking about. So, number one, very happy to supply them. I would like to note that one of the terms of the joint venture is all of sort of the deals that we've signed since the end of February will
Yeah.
get transferred into the JV, which is great, right? Like the Australian market needs to stand on its own two feet. I think the reason that we're super excited about the Incannex deal specifically and how it's going to like lead into sort of the growth of Cortexa is Cortexa is going to have revenue on day one, right? They're
Okay.
going to get this sort of this purchase order gets transferred in, And on top of that, they have a relationship already in existence with Incannex. They're going to be like sort of the supplier. Incannex is only going to grow with time. They're going to be operating clinics. We have deals with other clinic operators as well, but Incannex has got really, really great capabilities on the clinic front. So I'm very, very bullish about sort of the ability of Cortexa, our joint venture, to work with clinics like Incannex well into the future.
Well, I bring all this stuff up, and like I said, you've been putting a lot of agreements together. You got to take that call.
No,
Anyways,
no, 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 absolutely not.
but as I said off the top, it's like quite the move with the stock. As I said, it was 2.5 cents back 6 months ago. Investors are now looking at nearly even more than a 20x move. Like I said, despite the fact that the psychedelic sector remains in slumber, you surprised at all based on the performance so far that the stock has done here in 2023?
I mean, look, I don't. I'll be the first to admit that I do not understand the capital markets. I'm not a capital markets CEO. I focus on the operations and the regulatory
I
of the
hear ya.
business. I didn't understand why we were 2 cents when we were 2 cents. I don't understand where we were at 50 cents. We're at 50 cents. I think that a couple of things are true. One is we should never have been 2 cents. I mean,
Yeah,
we were
yeah.
dealing with a lot of sort of extraneous factors, war and everything else, and we weren't well known in the market yet. I'm very grateful to those sort of investors who bought into the story at 2 cents, and I
Yep.
think they've been amply rewarded for their initial vote of confidence. Now, at this point, I think the market is reacting to actual sort of factors affecting the core of the business. So sales, revenue, partnerships, and the regulatory sort of changes that impact our future growth. So I think, obviously I'm biased, but I think we are where we are because we deserve to be and because we positioned ourselves the right way.
So, what do you think the opportunity presents to you? And let's have like forward-thinking statements. A lot of
Sure.
rumors that the FDA is going to approve MDMA.
Yeah.
And I know this is like speculating, but
Yeah.
we love to speculate in the investor world, don't we?
Of
But
course.
in the event that we do see FDA approving, let's say Q1 of next year, what does that present for like companies like yourselves that are deep in this space?
Sure. Look, a couple of things. Obviously, MAPS is going to have sort of first pole position in the U.S., and that's great. We have talked to them about supplying them. We would love to do so. We talked about that before we got on
Yeah,
the actual call.
podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. But the other opportunity that is really, really interesting to us is number one, you now have countries like Australia, which have basically said, like, look, we don't need a new drug application. We are convinced by the strength of the research and we are convinced by the need of patients that we should just allow these molecules to be prescribed, right? Like, let's go. These are off-patent molecules. There's no sort of IP involved. Let's just approve them, and we will see other countries do that. So for us, like replicating the Australia model that we've established with Cortexa is a huge opportunity to other countries in the world, and we are going to pursue those. And then number two, we do research and develop novel analogs of MDMA. We are looking at analogs that have a better safety profile and that
Okay.
are also better in specific populations of concern. So our first phase 2 clinical trial, which we are hoping to launch in December, is going to focus on social anxiety symptoms in autistics. There are lots and lots and lots of applicable sort of conditions for these molecules, and we want to get rolling in a whole bunch of countries, not just
Yeah, but I think the
Australia.
story right now that people are really appealed by is obviously the production of MDMA, psilocybin, and the partnerships that are going on right now, which is why the stock has moved. What would you say right now just to sustain long-term growth? Like last thing retail investors want to see is a stock rip to 55 cents and drop back down to 15. But
Sure.
what would you say is, I guess, some remaining catalysts here in 2023 for you?
Well, listen, we haven't even started selling into Australia yet, right?
Yeah.
So remaining catalyst for the year is let's see how the Australian market sort of shakes out. Let's see how Cortexa grows as a business for the Australian market. But also don't forget, we still sell into clinical trials all over the world, right? Future clinical trial business in Australia is going to go to the joint venture. But we have all of Europe, we have North America, we have South America, we have Asia. Lots and lots and lots of markets are only going to pick up on the clinical trial front, and we are going to be there to supply them.
It's great. Well, listen, great story. And as I
Thank
said,
you.
I think there's going to be a turning point within this industry. I'm sure you probably feel that way too. And it already is
Of
happening
course.
for you, but for the overall industry as a whole, Hearing rumors is MAPS potentially going public. There's some interesting moves last week pertaining to Rick Doblin. Still very much involved in the company, but it sounds like this is about to go from a nonprofit to profit organization, which I get. And then you got, readouts, of their phase 3, which I'm hearing are going to be very strong. That's great. That's only going to be compelling for the industry as well. And then FDA news, like it's an encouraging time. And I know there was a big shakeout, but why not? There was 440 companies 2-3 years ago that, wanted to get into drug development and had about $100 raised money in the bank account. Like, I think a lot of people have learned the lesson with the industry. But congrats on the news. Congrats on the partnerships, and best of luck moving forward. And let's keep in touch.
Thanks, Chad. Great to be here. Thanks again for having me.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. And if you want to learn more about the emerging industries that we cover, then leave a comment below and let us know who you want us to interview, the questions you want asked, and the information that you want to learn. We want to hear from you. As usual, click on that bell for all notifications to get the latest information. Share this video with your network, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel because we would not be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.